Live from WZBC Newton, it's time for First Stop, 9 a.m. Saturday morning. It's a rainy day here at Boston College. Today we have a great show for you today, as usual, jam-packed.
In this episode, we have a guest today in the studio. Gerard, our contributing philosophy and theology writer, is here. How's it going, Gerard?
It's going good. It's great to be here.
Good. Thank you for joining us. We also have some updates on the First Stop media team. Let's start with sports. Jacob, lead us off.
All right, so have you guys heard, I'm going to start things off with as usual, an analogy story with what topics will be for today. Have you guys heard of the Stanford marshmallow experiment?
I have not, no.
No? So my psych class, we learned about this experiment that took place in the 70s, I believe. And what they did was they wanted to test, patience and whether... So what they did was they sat a kid down in a room and they... So they sat a kid down in the room and they said, well, you can either have the marshmallow now or wait 5 minutes and get two. So basically it was a test of patience, and I'm not surprised if every single member and owner of the Browns organization failed that patience test.
Wow.
Yeah, big news. I don't know if it's surprising, but the Browns fired head coach Hugh Brown, whose record with the Browns was 3-36-1, and their offensive coordinator Todd Haley. In the past 18 years, the Browns have had 9 coaches, and their defense. So, what are your thoughts, Eric, being a Browns fan with this constant rotation?
Right. So my issue has always been with the Browns and with teams that always do this, is they pin the problem on the coaches.
Yeah.
And while I would say a majority of the time, the problem is not with the coaches, it's with the talent. And I think the owners and obviously the players don't want to admit that they're the issue.
Yeah.
And it's the players. Our core is not solid. Our core is not good. We have Baker Mayfield, Njoku, Landry. Okay, we have solid there, but our offensive line is awful. We need to get a far better offensive line, which is very easy to build in drafts. Mm-hmm. So the issue is we always pin it on the coach. We always fire coaches. We Hugh Jackson. That's going to be obviously. Then what's next? These coaches have to do a song and dance to stay on the team. I'm sorry, but I'm like we're sick of this. We need to keep consistency. Hugh Jackson, he couldn't have helped the tie against the Steelers. That was a horrible call in the refs, but he had resulted in a tie. When the general manager who owns Pilot, gas stations, he said, well, we should have won more games. Well, how could he help a horrible call 3 times? The Raiders game, with that horrible call in the Raiders game. How about the Steelers game where it ended up in a Steelers touchdown and a tie? Hugh Jackson can't control that. Hugh Jackson has been a solid coach for the last 2-3 years on the Browns, and now we fired him. What does that show about our team? It shows that we're unstable now. We have to have a whole new coaching transition and a whole new culture change.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, like you were saying, if you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, in our first few weeks, we broke down our top NFL teams. Yeah. And surprisingly, statistically, the Browns were there. I mean, their defense was top 5. Their offense, I think, was top 15. Yep. But you've seen in these last few weeks when they're losing these close games, and obviously that's going to take a hit on your confidence and morality. But then to go fire your head coaches and completely change the culture, like you're saying, is going to hurt. Yep. I mean, their defense dropped to 30th now. Yep. Their total offense is ranked 28th. Yep.
We're back to where we are.
Yeah, in power rankings, you guys dropped 15%. Yeah. And I think that the Browns need to understand that, building a dominant team takes time. Right. Like with Steph Curry, for example. He didn't become a star in this league until 4 years since his rookie year. Yep. The Warriors, they were out of the scene for a while, but they were slow. They know, okay, we want to get shooters, we want to get pass-first players. Yep. And they built, a dominant team there. Right. Bears are coming back. They used to be out of the thing. They're slowly coming back. Right.
Khalil Mack helps. I mean, you guys have shown a culture of improvement.
Yeah.
The Browns. I think there's 2 things with the Browns. One is they haven't had the will to get better. But I would say that's probably changed with the last year. I think the other component is luck. I think we have just truly an unlucky team. And a lot of people always say, well, you can't say there's no luck in sports. I said, yeah, there is a component of luck in sports. I would say that the Browns having the horrible calls that they have this year, I think there are 4 times where the NFL refs have come out and said that was a missed call. Yeah. What are the odds of that happening to the Browns? Where I'm just truly angry and upset and frustrated, I think, more or less at the Browns. Not at the Browns, but at just our horrible luck. And I think is I don't know how you fix that. You know, I love Cleveland, and Cleveland has always been called the mistake on the lake, and the Browns do not help that. You know, the Cavs, we'll talk about that later, have not helped that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what is going on? So I think that the coaching shift is the wrong move. We should stick with Hugh Jackson as long as possible, create stability, creates consistent, and you just start building a better team. These players that we get have to accept that they're not the best. I mean, look at the kicker we had 4 weeks ago now, who missed 3 field goals in the game.
Yeah.
He's not a good kicker. So that starts with that kind of mentality of getting a better team, not a different coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was most surprising, I mean, when you look at, Hugh Jackson's record, you can be like, okay, maybe there needs to be a shift there. But Todd Haley, he has a pretty nice resume working with, the Cowboys in the past and their, offensive, prowess. So that's just surprising that you'd get rid of a guy like that.
So I think the rumor was, with Haley's firing, was after the game, the last game, both coaches did not go in the locker room. To address the players. Now, obviously, that's not grounds for firing. That's just, it probably was a catalyst for firing because there probably were some issues in the past. But maybe we don't know. But the rumor is on the street that Todd Haley and Hugh Jackson are not putting all they can in the team. Is basically what it was. And the general manager saw them not going in the locker room to say what the hell went on, and they they're like, okay, that's That's what it is. So I don't know.
And I'm looking at the Browns and how they're playing, and Baker Mayfield seems very, to me at least, very unsteady, unconfident in the pocket. Like he's gonna. I mean, that's to be a byproduct of your offensive line.
That definitely was.
But I don't know. I feel like with Baker Mayfield, I'm gonna give him. I think with every rookie, you need to give. Because it's such a short season, 2 seasons to let them prove themselves. Because there is a change in college.
Right.
With college sports, there's a star and there's everybody else.
True.
So if you're...
But I would say that if Baker Mayfield had the Rams offensive line, obviously a solid team, they have yet to lose, I think he would be just as good as Justin Mahomes. I think he would just be just as good as any other rookie quarterback right off the bat. Mahomes, the great offensive line. I think it does come down to the Browns' offensive line.
Yeah,
which is something that is so solid for every team that they should have get right. The receiving core, the running back core, that should come later to build and change the dynamic. Yeah. But the O-line is just kind of a baseline thing you have to have. We don't have that.
Yeah,
and so I think Baker Mayfield is a very good quarterback as a rookie. And I know you've always been skeptical, but I do think he's a good quarterback. I think if he had a better offensive line and had that sense of security, we would see him throwing, 5 touchdowns a game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like he would be far more confident than what he is now.
Yeah. And what's interesting is with the Browns, and I find that their first move tends to be either, okay, we're losing every single game of the season. Here's what we need to do. Either change the coaching staff,
right,
or their first move in the draft is always just take a quarterback.
Yep, that's always what it is.
What are they, it's with I hate to always compare it to basketball,
right,
but with the Bulls, Chicago Bulls, they always take a forward or a center in the draft and no, we need explosive guards.
Right.
Not now, we have some good guards now, but in the past few years they've been doing that.
Yeah.
But you need to get a good offensive line.
So that's the thing is that during this draft season, this past one, I was really hopeful the Browns would not go for a quarterback because we've done that for how long.
Yeah.
And we always think that the quarterback will fix all of our problems. And while quarterbacks help a bit, it goes back to what I said. We need an offensive line, we need a receiving core, and we need a running back core. And I was saying that before the Browns should go for a defensive unit where you go for defensive skill.
Yeah.
Because I think if we focus to be a defensive first team, in the short run, we figure out to be a defensive team, then I think we have a good chance of getting higher draft picks, right? If we accept the fact that we're not going to win this season, for example, then let's focus on defense. And then we can build off of that. So it's a very long-term strategy. And obviously you want to win games. But when you have the worst of luck as the Browns have had, or the horrible offensive core that the Browns have, I think it's time to start looking down the road and say, okay, in the short run we'll incur losses, but in the long term we're going full bear.
And also with the Browns, with their folks, so with every professional league, it's a system that works. The Spurs, the Warriors, the Patriots. Yeah. It's you get a good system in place, you teach the players how to run the system, and the system works itself. With the Browns, it seems like it's like, no, we want to get a star, and we think the star will lead.
Yeah.
You have to get a system down.
Well, I think the system works for a lot of teams. I think we're working for the system.
Yeah.
I think the Browns are working for the system because they're just trapped in these cycles of just unluck, and I truly think that they are just like, very unlucky, and I don't know how you break that. I really don't, unless we break it with a luck, an off luck thing. I don't know.
Yeah, so hopefully their luck will change after a quick music break. We're gonna be back with some NBA quick news and the updates to the.
Welcome back to First Stop. We're going to talk real quick about the MLB news. I think everyone knows that the Red Sox have won the World Series. I'd like to congratulate all the Red Sox fans out there. Sam, our head sports correspondent, I'd like to congratulate you and all the Boston fans out there. Congratulations. Very nice. Yep, the Red Sox beat the Dodgers in Game 5.
That's right. I
did call that. All my other predictions were wrong. I said that it would be the Brewers, not the Dodgers. But Red Sox won in 5.
Yeah.
Great series. I mean, the Red Sox obviously were the favorite team. They are just a very dominant team. They have, great core. Betts, Benintendi, they're pitching. And surprisingly, the bullpen did pretty well in the offseason. That's always been the concern of the Red Sox, was their bullpen.
Yeah.
The relieving pitchers have not been great. Kimbrel and others. So it's good to hear that they kind of came through. David Price, actually, who was at least the worst postseason pitcher in the league.
Yeah.
Really turned it around, and he did well in I believe Game 2, where he did really extremely well. So we had the longest game in World Series history this series. 18 innings. Dodgers pulled out the win at the end, but it was a lot. I mean, you played a 7.5 hour game. So I congratulate the Red Sox. It'll be great to see. Baseball offseason is going to be interesting. We have a lot of free agents.
Bryce Harper's the big one, right?
Bryce Harper's the big one.
Yeah.
Manny Machado's out of the Dodgers. I think Kershaw just signed another, 3-year extension with the Dodgers. And he's obviously a stud pitcher. So we'll see. A lot of stuff. Hopefully, and obviously what Sam was saying last time, the Harper could go to the Yankees. That would be awful, but it's possible. Machado, who knows what he'll end up. So yeah, it'll be an interesting offseason. We'll obviously have it covered for you all in live time. Also, check out our head sports correspondent Sam's first article blog called Sox in 5. It details the game and the series perfectly.
That's right.
I love Sam's insight. I think he's a great writer. So please check it out on our website, firststopofficial.com, under the sports tab, and also under the MLB tab.
Yep. So you're going to hover over the sports tab at the top and then click on the MLB. Great article, like Eric was saying. Alrighty. So Fantastic. On to NBA quick news. So Derrick Rose on Halloween night drops 50 points against the Jazz, a career high.
Wow.
It was definitely an emotional comeback after all his injuries. Coming from Chicago, being a big Derrick Rose fan, great to see him back. Unfortunately, I was looking at my ESPN news this morning, and he said he only played 4 minutes in the first half of last night's game because he had some ankle soreness. So,
that's not good.
It's not his. It's bad luck, but it's not gone. Right. I don't think we'll ever get the Derrick Rose we used to have, but it's definitely great seeing him have one last. I don't want to say one last, but one other great night.
Jeez, Jacob.
Sorry about that. But yeah. So. Some other big NBA news is, as usual, the Lakers are not doing as well as people expected with LeBron James.
Nope.
They're 3-5 now. Eric is not. You can already see the tension with LeBron fading from Cleveland. But anyways, so LeBron going to the West is going to be much. We all knew that with him going to the West, it's going to be much more difficult. I'm looking at their schedule, and he has no breaks. He'll play the Nuggets one night. Then the Trailblazers and two days later, then the Spurs, then the Warriors. So being in the West, you're going to play a lot more competitive teams than you're used to in the East.
Yep.
And I'm looking at them playing. They're moving the ball well, but I think they're moving the ball better with Lonzo than Rajon Rondo.
Yeah.
So I think they both have their pros and cons, of course. So Lonzo, I think his pros, he's a lot more calm, and he's not going to bring that tenacity that Rajon Rondo brings, whereas Rondo has that veteran status, has a little bit more toughness that LeBron would like to have on the team.
Yep.
So But if I would have to pick one, it would be Lonzo. I mean, I was watching him play. He was playing 33 minutes when they won against the Mavericks, and their ball movement was like Spur-esque. Like, it was like Spurs-esque.
Well, I've never heard that adjective used. Yeah, Spurs-esque.
I'm dropping it. It was unreal. Like, the ball movement was like, it was fun to watch. Good basketball.
What do you think of Ingram on the Lakers? What are your thoughts?
I like him. So I think for them to contend, they need to get at least one more A player.
Okay.
LeBron's an A. You could argue A plus, but I would say A. He's not.
LeBron? Oh yeah, he's an A plus.
A plus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's LeBron.
It's LeBron, yeah.
It's not like it's LeBron. Yeah,
I'd say like he's like a 97, 98.
Okay, that's an A plus. Yeah.
A plus. So LeBron's an A plus, and your next best player is Brandon Ingram, who I would say is a B plus at best.
Okay.
And I think you need to. I think the Lakers need to make one more move to get one more star, whether that's Kawhi or someone else, to at least give them a chance to contend. You look at all the other contenders, and they have at least 2 A players. So you have the Warriors with Durant and Curry. Celtics, you have Kyrie, Hayward. You have a lot of Celtics are interesting. You have a lot of like A minus, B plus players.
Oh yeah,
that's why they
solid.
can be a favorite this year.
Yeah, I could see it.
So, still the rule of 20 games still stands. I'm going to wait till 20 games until I, decide to change my mind. But I think the Lakers are still going to be a top 5 team. They just need to make some movements with their roster and make it fit that pass first type play that we see them working with so well. Onto the Cavaliers, as we mentioned earlier, firing Tyronn Lue after an 0-6 start. And I'm not a Cleveland fan, but I'm really getting frustrated with like Cleveland organizations in general.
Well, I am too.
Because, especially for you, Eric. But I'm looking at the roster, and I'm telling you right now that Tyronn Lue, that with the Cavs, their issue isn't Tyronn Lue. It's not their roster. It's Dan Gilbert in the front office, and them always changing. Right. I mean, in the past, Dan Gilbert has had issues with LeBron.
Right. And political issues, like nationally political issues, and also like team political issues.
Absolutely.
Right.
You need to give the time for the Cavs to prove themselves, and you can't make those quick decisions like I'm saying earlier. You have to be patient. You have to win the Stanford marshmallow experiment, like I was saying earlier.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd thing, but no, I see. I think I'm far more skeptical on the Cavs' performance now that Kevin Love is now out for 6 weeks because of a toe surgery.
Yeah.
Well, when he was at Minnesota, he was always injured. I don't think the man is probably early on, but never played a full season through. I don't really think he has. Now with him out, oh boy, I don't see us going above 250 now. We're already 1-7. We're playing the Hornets tonight. It's like, okay, I don't see us winning against them, and it's the Hornets. Like I don't know. I'm very frustrated. I think Tyronn Lue was not a good coach. I think he was good because LeBron was there and LeBron was the coach. Tyronn Lue didn't know what he was doing. He looked confused half the times. He would run plays where no sane person would run an ISO in a situation where you have to start scoring a bunch of points from the three. So I just don't get what. Yeah, I don't know. I think this past week of firing all these coaches from Maryland to the Browns to Cavs to other teams who have been firing these coaches, it's like, wow, it's shaking up time. So I don't know. I think Tyronn Lue was not a great coach. I think he was trying to be a coach when LeBron was really the coach, and now he had to actually prove himself as a coach, and that obviously didn't work out well. Dan Gilbert and that whole culture, I think that's a different argument. I think the way they're handling the Cavs or handled the Cavs wasn't great. If I was Dan Gilbert, I'd be frustrated too that LeBron kind of took over the team. I mean, he marched into that office and told him, "You're going to sign J.R. Smith. You're going to sign, Tristan Thompson." It's like, okay, well, how are they going to fight LeBron James? He's easily going to leave, and there goes your team. So he really had a stranglehold on the team. So I could see Dan Gilbert's frustration with that. So I don't know. I think that it'll be I agree with the 20-game rule, although I think you can see trends occurring now, and I just don't see it working out well. I do now see what you were saying early on about them being a bottom 5 team. I was just thinking you were just being a Cavs hater, but I can see it now, especially with Kevin Love out. Yeah. Who's supposed to step up? I mean, Sexton's a very solid player. I think he's number 4 on points per game leader currently, and so that's promising. But we need a shooter because the league has shifted to a shooting league.
Yep.
We need a shooter. We need Better defense. Kristaps is solid, but I don't know.
You need more two-way players.
Yeah.
I think this was the reason why I was skeptical with the Tyronn Lue firing was this was his first year as the coach, like you're saying.
Yeah.
LeBron was the coach in the past. I think waiting 6 games to prove himself was not, fair on their part.
No.
That's why I think you had to wait a little more games to see how he was. But I'm interested to know, did you like David Blatt more, or did you like Tyronn Lue?
Oh, man, no. David Blatt was not great either. So, we have had just not... coaching in the Cavs has been just non-existent because of LeBron. And that's just exactly what I just said. I do not think that Tyronn Lue or Blatt really made a difference. Because when you were to listen to those mic'd up things when they're on the sideline, LeBron's doing all the talking. Tyronn Lue just holds the whiteboard with stuff drawn on it.
Yeah.
He looked like he was trying to get an autograph from LeBron instead of actually coaching him. So I think that his coach David Blatt was not. I mean, Tyronn Lue was a good replacement for David Blatt, but that being said, Tyronn Lue was not a great coach. So it's kind of like just stuck. So now I think it's time to find a better coach. And build it from there, make it a coach-centric team instead of like a player-coach-centric team like LeBron, which I don't know if that's even a term, but I think it is now because of LeBron.
Yeah.
So
I know this probably won't happen, but with the Cavs, they have so many mediocre players, and they need to get a one-star player to be a middle team at best.
Yeah.
With Jimmy Butler, I would love to see Jimmy Butler go to the Cavs.
Oh man, I don't see it.
I don't see it either. But because the Miami Heat not the Miami Heat, the Timberwolves would be looking for a trade.
Yeah.
And you don't want anybody from the Cavs. But still, hypothetically, seeing Butler on the Cavs would be interesting.
Oh yeah, no,
because he wants his own team. Like I was saying in 2 podcasts ago.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the Cavs' goal is. I think maybe it is just to rebuild in the next 5 years and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So it's very disheartening.
Yeah, and I think the league is making, unfortunately for you, I think they're making moves towards, disinteresting or disincentivizing the rule for just tanking and just getting a first-round pick.
Right.
Because that's what the Cavs have done in the past. They're going to do it in the future.
Exactly.
Hopefully Colin Sexton evolves into a star. So
yeah, no, I agree. All right, we'll be back for some news headlines really quick, and then we'll get on to our interview with Gerard. It'll be fun. Keep it locked and rocking here on First Stop. Welcome back. The following news headlines do not suggest a bias on behalf of WZBC or WVBC under any circumstances. The following is for educational purposes only. If any opinion is expressed in the following, they are not reflective of WZBC or WVBC respectively. Now for this week's headlines. On October 27th, a gunman named Robert Bowers shot and killed 11 people in a shooting in Pittsburgh that is considered anti-Semitic and hate-driven. Robert Bowers, 46, has pled not guilty to the charges. The election is on Tuesday of next week. Republicans are pushing to shore up any vulnerable candidates in hotly contested seats, while Democrats are riding on the belief that the discontent with President Trump will allow them to take a House majority. Many believe that the Senate will remain in Republican control, while with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying that they will confirm the most amount of judges to the circuit courts than ever before after the election. Nancy Pelosi, the assumed Speaker of the House if the Democrats win, has promised to block any of the president's agenda in the House, leaving him a lame duck president for the next 2 years. Next week's podcast is the election edition, where I'll go over more in depth on the fallout from the election and what will mean for 2 years, for 2020, and beyond. In foreign news, Brazil elected a right-wing populist as their president. Jair Bolsonaro is an outspoken critic of the corrupt government and corrupt politicians involved in the corruption scandals that rocked Brazil for the last 5 years. He was elected 55-44, winning over the far-left PT Workers' Party of Brazil. This election was the clearest dividing line of political ideologies of the left and the right we have seen since 2010. Bolsonaro ran a campaign of cleaning up Brazil, as he was the only high-ranking politician not to be involved in any corruption charges whatsoever. The reasons he was elected are quite clear. Brazil is still in a deep recession that has left many people skeptical of big tent moderate parties. The worsening migrant crisis from Venezuela is also a concern. Bolsonaro wants to 1. Cut taxes, 2. Allow regular citizens to possess firearms, since Brazil has the toughest gun laws in the world, and 3. Allow for generals to hold political positions to prosecute and clean up the government. This will be an interesting development, for sure. We'll be right back after a quick break to talk with Gerard. Keep it locked and rock. Welcome back to First Stop. Took a little bit of a break there. We're back now with our chief theology and philosophy.
Contributing writer for First Stop Media.
Yep, Gerard. Gerard, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah. So, where are you from?
So I am from Long Island, New York. That's just about where I live. It's on the North Shore. Fun fact, it's actually where East Egg is in The Great Gatsby.
Oh, wow.
Or watched the movie with Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
So I'm just about half hour away from the city.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Does your house look like his?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
But hopefully in the future.
I was gonna say that's a shame.
Yeah.
What's your major?
So I'm a double major. My first major is in philosophy, and in the second one I'm in CSOM, which is the business school here for management and leadership.
Oh, awesome!
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So you said you're a philosophy major. We know you're a philosophy guy. What drew you into philosophy?
Sure. So I guess I started reading about philosophy after I went on this really cool trip, junior year of high school, to Israel.
Oh, wow.
And the idea of the trip was it was seven Catholic kids, 7 Jewish kids, and we went on this trip to the Holy Land together. And it was really cool going to all the these holy sites, but primarily what I found was really interesting is having honest conversations with people who had fundamentally different beliefs than me. So a lot of the Jewish kids on the trip, this was the first time that anyone had asked me seriously about why I believed different things I did, about the way I lived my life. And after, I guess I realized I needed to start getting good answers to these questions. Yeah. So I went back. When I went back home, I started reading mainly Thomas Aquinas. So from that, I sort of fell in love with Thomas Aquinas and what you call Thomism, which is sort of his philosophy.
So what about Thomism drew you to that, as opposed to Augustine or anyone else?
Sure. So I guess the first thing that I love about it is just the way that he writes. So the Summa Theologiae, which is his major big work, the way that it's set up is it's all 1,000,000 questions. So it's something I think 30,000 pages in total. And the whole setup is you'll have a question. Before the question, you'll have 3 objections to what Thomas is going to prove. So, for example, if you could say, well, is God good? You would have 3 objections saying, well, God isn't good because of these reasons. Yeah. Then you would have a short summary answer that he calls the sed contra, which means the on the contrary, which he usually applies to some, it's an argument of authority, basically. You say, well, Augustine said this, or Plato said this. Then he gives his answer, and then he responds to the 3 objections in the beginning. And I found that just a really efficient way to learn philosophy, because it's just gives you the points, gives you what you need to know. And I think that was his intent. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So I think today we were going to talk about kind of this overarching theme, and you could explain to us kind of Thomism and just rationally what Thomas is arguing in kind of a boiled down sense. Mm-hmm. You said, I guess you mentioned to me before a thing called summum bonum. What is that?
Sure. So this is one of the classic questions that pretty much any philosopher winds up needing to answer, and I think really any person needs to answer. In Latin, what it means is the greatest or highest good. And ultimately, that's what's going to make us happy, right? Because when we acquire goods, we get a certain amount of happiness. So the question is saying, what is going to make me ultimately happy? That if I have just this, if I just live my life leading towards this, it's going to bring me ultimate happiness.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. So we laid out kind of framework of things we could argue make us happy. But do they truly make us happy, I guess, right? And I think the first one is wealth. And you said this one's pretty the standard one to go to is wealth. Does accumulation of wealth make you happy? And does Thomas Aquinas argue that?
Yeah, sure. So basically Thomas treats this in the prima secundae, which is for Latin for the first part of the second part, so the prima and then secundae of the Summa Theologiae. And what he goes through is a bunch of different potential answers to what the summum bonum is. Mm-hmm. So the way that he works is he starts with what he believes to be the silliest answers, and he works his way down to what the best answers are. So we're starting with wealth because that's what he considers the silliest answer. So basically, he starts the conversation with distinguishing between two different kinds of wealth. So he says that there's natural wealth and artificial wealth. If you've read people like Locke or Hobbes or any of the sort of natural law philosophers, you can get an idea of this. That natural wealth is just what you need to survive. So it would be like shelter or food. And then artificial wealth is basically like currency, where you can acquire more things than you would need by just your own. So ultimately, Thomas's argument for this, and I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this, is that basically you can only have so much natural wealth. So you can only have so many meals a day. Right. After like 5 meals, you're just, you don't even want it. And then artificial wealth, he says, is even a sillier answer. Because you only want artificial wealth so that you can get natural wealth.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Although, if it is bulk season, you can't have many meals a day.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, you can only have so much shelter.
Wait, so
true shelter.
Is natural wealth, that's what, is that referring to happiness and just feeling fulfilled? Is that what that refers to?
Well, I guess the person who would be arguing for this would say that, well, if you just got enough food, if you were able to satiate all the things that you need to survive, then you would be happy. And I think it's important to maybe not think of this argument so much as a straw man, because we hear for a long time, for maybe our whole lives, that, oh, money won't make you happy. But it seems like a legitimate objection that, like, hey, listen, if I could just get like all the things I need, right? Yeah. Don't need to worry about this or that. Yeah. Then it seems like we would be happy. Right. And I think that sort of gets into one that we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is power. Right. Because money can give you power, and you can say, well, maybe money isn't it, right? But maybe if I had the power that I got from money, then I would be totally happy.
Well, I guess there's a sense of security with artificial, wealth, which is the accumulation of currency, because maybe in a sense it does give you power, but it does give you that opportunity to acquire what Aquinas calls, or Locke, or any of them call natural wealth, which is shelter and stuff. That's the security aspect. But I guess Aquinas would argue that there's probably a higher, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're fulfilling those two bottom tiers of shelter, food, all that stuff. But then it's that kind of self-fulfillment on the top. You have here fame and glory is the second one, he says.
Yes. So fame and glory, I'm also just clumping this in with honors as well. In our culture, it seems people aren't interested as much in honors. But I think especially in Asian cultures, it's still very much alive. So it's a legitimate objection to what the summum bonum should be. So let's... I could probably even read a little bit from what Thomas says about if the summum bonum consists of fame and glory. And essentially his answer, he gives a couple of arguments. The first one says, I'm going to read directly from the Summa here. Furthermore, we must observe that human knowledge often fails, especially in contingent singulars, such as human acts. For this reason, human glory is frequently deceptive. So the first objection that he raises is, well, you can be given fame or glory for bad reasons. It can be deceptive.
That's true.
So if you don't really have anything good, then you actually haven't acquired any good. The bonum part of the summum bonum is just people are wrong about you. Right. So I think this leads us to the point that whatever is the summum bonum is going to need to be something inside of you, something that you acquire.
And that connects to a really nice
marshmallow experiment.
Not marshmallow experiment, but one of the I forget where it was from, but one of the quotes you had. That like the treasures you have, like that the treasures you like accumulate on Earth like will perish, but like the ones that you get inside.
Yeah.
I forget what the exact one is, but like
you can't take it with you when you die, kind of.
Exactly.
Thing, right?
Yeah. I think what you're talking about. I couldn't give you the verse, but it's a quote from Jesus. And the quote, it says, "Do not accumulate treasures on earth where moth and rust decay, but accumulate for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust can decay."
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I think going back to the whole fame and glory and honor component, would Aquinas argue then that, I would say, what time would best encapsulate honor? Probably Rome, or what you said, Eastern traditions in the modern sense, like, any Eastern philosophy, like Confucianism and stuff. Would he say, though, that the Roman generals who got honor and glory by death and destruction were inherently wrong then, and that glory then is wrong? So it's wrong-headed because of the bad they committed. So the good, I guess if you want to say the good that is honor or glory or whatever, fame, was committed by a bad, he would then ultimately say, well, since it was committed by a bad, it's a bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think in a practical way we could look at this. One of the reasons why I love Thomas Aquinas is because he's extremely practical. He's like Aristotle. In fact, if you know a little bit about the history of philosophy, he basically was the person who brought Aristotle to Western theological thought.
Oh, wow.
So, like Aristotle, he's practical, and the ultimate test for Thomas, I think, is if it holds up to our day-to-day experience. And so to do that, you could ask, well, were the Roman emperors happy? Or to bring it up to date, are the celebrities today happy?
Yeah.
And I think the answer, it sort of answers itself.
No.
There's a lot of stories of them being very upset.
Yeah, drug addiction and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I think then Aquinas would argue the next one is power. Because, and we talked about that in slightly earlier, was natural wealth, artificial wealth gives you power. And what is his argument on that?
Yeah, so I think power is one of the most interesting ones. I think this one might be the one that, as a country, Americans fall into the most. Maybe to update the word, I might call it freedom. Is freedom going to make you happy? And it seems like in America, this is the ultimate standard, right? Well, and I don't want to say that I don't think freedom is good, but the question is that like all we want in life? And Thomas points, I think Thomas, to someone who would say, well, my ultimate goal is just to get freedom, would say, well, freedom to do what?
True.
So I think of it, imagine that you got all the power you needed, all the freedom you could have, and you're sitting in your house. Well, what do you do with it now, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we really only want power, and maybe another modern term could be security, right?
Right.
People want to get enough money, they want to get enough education that they could be in a place where they're comfortable in their lives. And it seems to me like, okay, well, once you're comfortable, you're going to want to enjoy some good. Right. So then what is that? Is it food? Is it money? Is it now what are you going to do once you have this power?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a very finalist argument where it's just like, what do you do at the end with it, right? It decays. Now, with freedom, though, one could argue that if you were to go living out in a cabin in New Hampshire, you're free. You're free from all commitment. You're free from all people. But what do you do with that freedom, and what is the end goal of that? You can go become a hermit out in a cabin. What good does that create? I guess creates a good for you, but is creating a good for you the only ultimate end of a goal or end of a good, right?
Yeah. So I think someone who wanted to become a hermit would find out in short time he needs to be doing something when he's there.
Yeah.
So what is it? Maybe very smart philosophers throughout the ages have thought, well, maybe it's to acquire virtue, right? This is what many of the Greek philosophers thought. Or if you want to do a modern approach, you have the transcendentalists like Thoreau and Emerson,
right.
Who would probably fall into that category.
Yeah.
And, well, for them, it would probably be communing with nature,
right.
Becoming more aware of yourself, which in a certain way maybe is akin with virtue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually going to be moving into some of Thomas's next objections. If virtue is the ultimate happiness, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So and then what does he say about virtue as the ultimate happiness?
Yeah. So that's going to be coming under basically the next heading, which is any bodily good, and virtues also reside in the soul. So the reason that he's ending this section with bodily goods is because all the possible answers that we've considered already are essentially bodily goods.
Right.
If man is both a body and a soul, there's certain goods that pertain primarily to his body, certain goods that primarily attain to his soul.
Right.
So now he's sort of covered the main bodily one objection. So he's going to say, well, is there any bodily good that will make us happy? Mm-hmm. And I think that he uses a really beautiful analogy here. And it might actually merit reading straight from the Summa. So I'm going to pull it up for you guys. And essentially, he uses, Thomas loves using different analogies. The medievals loved using analogies. And he uses the analogy of a ship. So I'll just read it here. So he says, I answer that it is impossible for man's happiness to consist in goods of the body for two reasons. And I'm just going to do it the first here. First, because if a thing be ordained to another as its end, its last end cannot consist of the mere preservation of its being. And here's the analogy. Hence, a captain does not intend as a last end for the preservation of his ship, since the ship is ordained to something else as its end, i.e. to navigation.
Okay.
So what he's arguing here is that if all we care about is bodily goods, essentially we're saying, well, we're the ultimate good.
Yeah.
It's just about preserving our life and minimizing damage.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I think Thomas is arguing it's obvious that we're not the supreme
right,
good.
Obviously.
If we were, then we would be supremely happy already.
Right.
And it would just be about fighting off things that would prevent the summum bonum.
Yeah.
But that's not our experience. We're restless.
Now you have here after any good of the body is pleasure. I would always equate, I guess maybe it's because just the word itself is not defined, but pleasure as being any good of the body. But you said pleasure is in Thomas's words any good of the soul.
Yeah. So it's actually both.
Okay.
So pleasure can be a good of the body, and in many cases it is. But we can realize that pleasure actually sometimes is of the soul. For example, the pleasure of a virtuous person. So the virtuous person, when he is temperate or just or any of the different virtues, he actually gets pleasure in doing that. And I think maybe a simple example you could say when you give money to a homeless person or you do anything that's good, you get pleasure in that. Yeah. And that's not really a pleasure of the body. That's a pleasure of the soul.
Yeah.
And does that counter then, this is kind of a separate vein, but does that counter kind of the egoist argument that like people who volunteer for charity are doing that for their own kind of good, right? That's always been the classic thing is with
are you really
cynics.
doing it? Yeah.
And it's like, are you truly doing that, or are you doing that to make yourself look good, make yourself feel good? And I guess going off that, is that, quote, feeling good a pleasure of the body or a pleasure of the soul? So would that refute kind of a cynic or an egoist argument?
So I think Thomas's eventual answer to this does. Okay. So you say, well, should I just try to look for pleasure? And I think Thomas is great. Well, again, one of the reasons I love Thomas is because he never gives straw man arguments in the objections he gives. So I think essentially what you're saying he formulates as one of his objections to his ultimate answer that pleasure isn't the summum bonum. So I'll read the objection. So the objection is, it would seem that man's happiness consists in pleasure. For since happiness is the last end, it is not desired for something else, but other things for it. So essentially what he's saying here is that it would be silly to ask, why do you want to be happy, right? Essentially everything else that we do it for a certain end. Everything we do in our life. So you can see even like, why did you brush your teeth this morning?
Right.
Well, I wanted to, have good dental health, and I wanted to have other people not think that I'm a slob.
Right.
Well, why did you think other people didn't want you to be a slob? Well, I would want people to take me serious. Well, why do you want people to take you serious? Well, I wouldn't be able to get a job. Why do you want to get a job? Well, I want to support my family. Why do I want to support your family? Well, I think ultimately that's going to be one of the things that makes me happy.
Right.
Everything we do, I think,
leads
to we're doing everything for happiness. And
that's true.
As a side note, I think that's why this is probably the most important question anyone asks in their life. Because once you know the end, once you know what you're looking for, then all the means, all the things that you do in your life become clear.
Makes sense.
Well, is he arguing for you find your own good and it's subjective, or is he does he conclude that there's an objective that someone's striving for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think something that a lot of people are confused about today. Thomas would say that there's ultimately an objective good of what all what all human beings desire. And he gives a couple of arguments in the question before the one that we're doing now. This is question 2. And the question that he asks in the first question is whether all men have the same last end, which is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah.
And he gives a couple of different arguments, but I think maybe the most powerful one is that we observe in nature that all different things act for different ends. And essentially what determines what kind of thing you are, what Thomas would call your nature, is the different things that you act towards. So for example, let's say a dog defines his nature by, well, he plays fetch, he reproduces, he does all these things. The way that we know what a dog is what he does.
Right.
So in the same way, if all men, right, did different acts to get the summum bonum, we would all have different natures. We would be different species.
True. Yeah.
But we observe that we all are the same species, so we must act towards the same way. It's in our nature to desire a certain thing. So that's essentially his argument for it.
The final point I think leaves us with a great way to close, but I think you said that his final argument is any created good is the most superior, the most supreme kind of summum bonum is any created good. Now, was that going off of what we just said, or is this another vein of what he's arguing? Any created good.
Yeah. So any created good is basically him saying, is it any good of the body, any good of the soul, any good? Will anything ultimately fulfill us? And I think there's a beautiful quote that might illuminate us here. It's from Father Norris Clark's book, The One and the Many, and it's basically a reflection on, it's a modern updating of Thomism. And he has a great quote here that says, when we first come to know or love some particular finite being, we are satisfied with it for a while, exploring it and savoring its goodness. But as soon as we reach its limits, as soon as we discover its finitude, that i.e. that it's not the fullness of being and goodness, our minds and wills immediately rebound beyond, seeking something further to know or to enjoy.
Makes sense. It's like the inevitable quest for or thirst for knowledge or new things, right, that humans are prone to.
Yeah. So Thomas would argue that every created being, by definition, must be finite. Because in order for something to be a being, you need to be able to distinguish it from something else.
Right, that makes sense.
And that's a limit on it. You're saying, well, I'm not Eric because, well, I don't have these characteristics. Right. I'm not from Cleveland. These things. And you could do it from all these other examples.
Right.
So, essentially, he's saying, well, will anything finite make us happy? And as I think Father Clark points out, that ultimately it seems like no. And we know this, one, from experience, and also from some arguments that Thomas gives. So Thomas says that no one wants to get like 32 good things, or wants to know 40 things, and that's it.
Right.
Ultimately, what we want is the universal good, something that's going to be totally satisfying, totally fulfilling.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I think, once philosophers arrive at that, it's sort of the ultimate question of how we're going to answer it. And we were talking before, it seems like there's three main answers that you could possibly give to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And those three are?
Yeah, so at least I think there might be more, but at least these are the ones that I would identify with, or that I think are the intellectually most sound. The first one is probably my second favorite philosopher after Thomas, is Albert Camus. He was a French existentialist. And the next one would be nihilism. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is Thomas's answer, which I'll probably read to you guys, is that God exists and that your ultimate good is to be a saint.
Yeah.
So I guess we can go through them.
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, let's do it.
Camus, I think the most enlightening work of his is the myth of Sisyphus. So if you guys know Greek philosophy, do either of you guys know the myth of Sisyphus?
I think I saw a painting once called Sisyphus, and that's about it.
Yes. So the
familiar.
idea is Sisyphus was one of the Greek gods, and I forget exactly what he did, but he wound up pissing off Zeus, and you don't want to piss off Zeus.
I think a lot of people pissed off Zeus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he winds up, his punishment is he needs to roll this boulder up a hill.
Oh, right.
And every time it gets to the top of the hill, it falls back down. He's
Yeah.
got to do it again. And Camus says this is essentially what life is like. We desire this ultimate good, this infinite good, but we can't get it. Camus is an atheist. And so therefore, life is absurd, as he said.
Absurdism.
Yeah. It's really almost just like a cool joke. So Camus says the best answer, just fool yourself that there's some meaning. Like Sisyphus, say, well, there's some reason I'm doing this, even though it's really pointless. And that's probably the best way you're just going to prevent yourself from committing suicide even. Just and it seems like that's at least I would say, if God doesn't exist, that's probably the best way to go. Not suicide. That's not what I'm saying.
No. Camus, but yeah.
That
Camus,
fake,
yeah.
That's faking it, yeah.
Yeah. Nihilism is probably a little bit more honest. It's just saying, well, there's not an ultimate reality to life, so life's ultimately just meaningless. There's nothing that I can do.
Yeah.
I guess my question, I wondered this, is Camus' absurdism similar to nihilism, or are they completely...
Oh, yeah. I think they're very similar.
Okay.
I think maybe you could make an argument that absurdism is just a certain kind of response to nihilism.
Okay.
But traditionally, nihilism wouldn't want to take the step of fooling yourself.
Right.
You know? That's
just accept it, that it is just what it is.
But I might say to a nihilist, if there is no point in life, why not fool yourself? Like, they don't have any ground to stand on saying, well, like, there's a reason not to do this. And then, obviously, Thomas's answer, he's a saint in the Catholic Church, is going to be that God is the summum bonum, and your ultimate happiness is acquiring him. So, in the end of this question, these are the very last sentences, Thomas says, hence, it is evidence that naught can null man's will, save the universal good. This is to be found not in any creature, because as we said, beings are always limited, but in God alone, because every creature has goodness by participation with his nature.
Okay.
So that's why we can get a certain amount of pleasure and real happiness, human happiness, from the created goods, because they do share in God's goodness, for Thomas. But ultimately, they're limited. They're never going to totally get us to what we want, which is God.
I see, because that's the ultimate fulfillment in Aquinas' mind, right?
Yeah,
exactly. In the church's mind, right? Okay, awesome. Wow, Gerard, we thank you for being on the show. Yeah. Honestly,
thank you.
We will have you back on, obviously.
Definitely.
Quick music break.
Well, quick
or
music break.
It?
Yeah, let's quick music break, then conclude.
All right, we'll be back.
We'll be back. Keep it locked and rocking. All right, welcome back. We thank you for joining us on First Stop today. Catch us every week on Saturdays at 9 a.m. on WVBC with a whole new special guest.
That's right. Today's podcast was great. I thought it was really good. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Gerard,
for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
He's a corresponding writer for the First Stop Media team here, and he'll be back on the podcast soon, hopefully. As usual, you can check out our full podcast, our two most recent ones, at soundcloud.com/firststopofficial. If you have a question or concern, or you wanted to talk about something, shoot us an email at firststopofficial@gmail.com.
Please check out our new website as of, 2 weeks now?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Firststopofficial.com. We have our own domain. It has our blog posts. It has episodes cut up. And it has, if you want to learn more about us, has all of our links. Check out firststopofficial.com.
That's right. Yeah, we got some good. We have some really nice articles out there right now. We have a Venom review. We have a few political discussions. We have a Nas review coming up, and we have the Red Sox article by Sam.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. All right. We will see you at the next stop.